Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. We're here back at Chico Bocello in Canonsburg, our home away from home, our studio, I guess, of sorts. And with us today is Amanda Filippelli. Amanda was introduced to us by Big Mig, our friend and marketing expert, Melissa Migliaro. And welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Since Melissa mentioned you and we kind of corresponded and set this all up, I've been kind of looking at your stuff. I mean, you're amazingly talented. Been really excited to meet you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So tell me a little bit about where are you local? Are you from here locally?
Yeah, I grew up in Baldwin. I live in Baldwin now. Yeah, so from the South Hills. Nice.
I used to be Borough Baldwin's engineer project manager. I did all their rebuilt their sewer system.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you were probably just a kid then. So it was almost 20 years ago. But so that's really cool. So you're in South Hills. You're here. You have got a very varied and kind of far-ranging background, right? You're a writer now. You're a creative, and we'll talk about your current book, The Remembering Room, which is really cool. I've heard great things about this. And you have an exhibit right now up at Tithy Studios in Sharpsburg. Yep. Tell me a little about that. Let's start there. Tell me about that.
Sure. So right now I'm exhibiting an interactive art installation at the studio. So almost 2 years ago in June, my dad died unexpectedly.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. And yeah, it was a really difficult time. Obviously, losing a parent, especially young and unexpectedly, really changes you in big ways. But my story was a little bit unique in that a month later to the day, I found out I was pregnant. So, yeah, so that's awesome. It was awesome, but it was also really difficult because it really inhibited my ability to go on the grief journey that I needed to go on. Okay. I always talk about in the book that I didn't want to grow my son in a womb full of grief. Like I didn't want to be a sad mom.
Sure.
And so I really put my grief process off for a while. So at the same time, I was kind of like stuck in between. I felt like a woman in the middle. I couldn't experience the great joy that I wanted to experience, but I also couldn't let myself go through like this deep grief that I had. So I was stuck between these warring emotions.
You needed to do both.
And I needed to do both. So when my son was about 6 months old, I realized it was time that I needed to really deal with that grief. And that's where the exhibit was born. I started creating these rooms based on these 4 stages of grief that I was working through in therapy. And at the same time, simultaneously wrote the book. So the book is a really specific representation of my grief journey through these 4 specific stages. And it's very specific to my experience with my father, but the exhibit is much more vague. So the purpose of the exhibit is to provide free public space for people to go and process their own grief using these 4 rooms, which are like surrealist interpretations of my 4 stages of grief. Okay. I think a lot of the time we're really ashamed to talk about grief.
Oh, absolutely.
We feel like a burden to talk about grief. We feel embarrassed talking about grief, and we feel those same things talking about death. Right. For me, before my dad died, death was a topic I couldn't even really think about. It was really hard. So the exhibit is meant to function as a space to give people permission to explore those things, and also to help people find connection with each other so that other grieving people don't feel alone. And yeah, the space is interactive, so it asks you to do a lot of things while you're there. So, hopefully people leave feeling a little lighter.
Well, that's amazing because I went through it. It'll be 6 years in May since my father passed. And my father was a huge influence on me, not only from time I was a kid, but also throughout my journey through life, because he was a teacher. And one of his things was that, education does not directly equal knowledge, right? Sure. Knowledge is a moving target. He said, you got to go out and live to find it. It's not going to come find you. So he was always kind of like my go-to whenever, something was going on. And, we were blessed to the extent it wasn't sudden. He was 84. We knew he had a cancer. So we knew it was coming, and I was able to, they live in California. So I was able to go out there because of the blessing of what I do for a living, spend a week, come back for a week, spend a week. So the last couple months of his life, we had some very deep conversations. And a lot of that is what brought back the the lessons, so to speak, and brought them full circle that ended up being in the book that I'm writing. So I think, but when he finally passed, it was odd because I can relate to what you're saying because I remember I didn't cry. You know, now, 6 years ago, I was 57 years old. So it's not like I was blessed to have him for a long time. But as close as we were, I felt guilty because I didn't cry. My father died and I didn't cry. And I don't know if it was because, I knew it was coming and I who knows, but I carried that guilt around for a long time.
Yeah.
I really did.
Yeah.
So I think this is so powerful and so important to people who have gone through that process.
Yeah.
Because it's, like you said, it's very personal and very individual.
I think grief is so multifaceted in that way, and that everybody experiences guilt through grief somehow in different ways. And that we're so judgmental about our grief, in this way that you're saying that you felt guilty for not feeling a certain way. But grief manifests how it manifests. And we have to be able to give ourselves that permission to just feel it, to be able to work through it. Yeah. I felt really guilty when I stopped feeling bad. I felt like I was doing my dad a disservice by not continuing to constantly mourn and feel this pain, because I found a lot of closure through this process of this book. So
it helps you to move on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that came with its own guilt that I immediately had to kind of identify and say, no, like this is a part of the grief process, and it's okay to feel this, but then move past it.
Right.
I just think these are conversations nobody's having.
No, and you're right. Death is unpleasant, right? It's a part of life. The process begins the day you're born. Yeah. Your process of you dying begins the day you're born, and it continues. And listen, when you get to be my age, you become very aware. Sure. No matter where I go from here, 2/3 of my life is over, right? So it's behind me, So, not only do you have that, it's tough to talk about, then all of a sudden you have to start dealing with regret. And, it becomes more a part of your life as you get older. It really does.
But I think the important thing for me that I've found in this work is that grief is an opportunity. Sure. And we don't tend to kind of view it that way. But for me, grief was an opportunity to find joy, because there is no other exit path from it. To be able to heal that grief, you have to bring new joy into your life. You have to be able to channel it into some kind of connection. For me, that meant trying to feel a connection with my dad still. And so I think when we can kind of turn it around and look at grief and the fear of death as an opportunity for what can we bring into our lives that creates joy and fulfillment, then grief becomes productive. It stops just being sadness.
Yeah. And I think grief is not just applicable to losing a loved one, a life. Really any loss brings with it a certain amount of grief.
Yes, and we've had so much the past few years. There have been there's a part of the exhibit that there's a sculpture of a womb, and you're asked to place something that you're still grieving into the womb that you want to let go of or grow or change. And a lot of people have put things in there. I mean, I don't read what gets put in there. This is just people telling me what they put in there. Just so everybody knows. But a lot of people have put things in there that have to do with their feelings of grief and loss over the pandemic, over their relationships, over pets, over all sorts of different things that really don't have anything to do with death and dying, perhaps, but is just proof that grief pervades our life in a lot of different ways.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I can relate to it. 'Cause, I got married very young, and I ultimately got divorced, and it wasn't a pleasant divorce, which was totally my fault. And I like to say, like I mentioned it to you earlier, I had a very bad marriage to an incredibly good woman, right? But what made that divorce what it was simply she needed to grieve for that loss. And I didn't see that. I didn't get it at the time. I know now, but I can't go back, right? But at that time, I didn't realize that there was a grief process there for her that she needed to go through, and I didn't give her the runway to do that. So that it really is applicable to a lot of different places.
Absolutely.
That's crazy. It's crazy how those things happen. So you weren't born a writer and artist. This is something that you had a life, you had jobs, you had a career, and you kind of came into this. How did that process happen for you?
Well, yes and no. So I always knew I wanted to be a writer.
Okay.
When I was a little kid, I started writing stories as soon as I could write. I mean, I wrote my first novella when I was 8. I was obsessed.
No kidding.
Yeah, I started submitting for publishing. My first publication was actually, I was 12. I have always been a writer, always a creative.
Wow, that is awesome.
What happened was growing up.
I was probably talking about myself.
A lot of people told me that you can't be a professional writer. You can't be a professional artist. You're going to kind of die poor and penniless.
You'll starve.
You're the starving artist trope. And I believed that. I internalized that. And everybody kind of told me I needed like a fallback plan.
Okay.
Growing up, I grew up with OCD and major depressive disorder, so I was very familiar with the mental health system in the area. I also grew up with a foster sister and biologically an only child. So I knew that there were things about the system that really needed changing, and I wanted to be a part of that. So I first went to school for a psych degree, and I worked in mental health care for 10 years.
Okay.
And I worked with adolescent survivors of trauma. And I loved it. I loved that work so much. I worked here in Pittsburgh and also in Chicago hospitals as well. And a big portion of my work had to do with writing and creativity and art. I used to run writing workshops with the kids that helped them kind of take some space away from their story so that they could get some objectivity. And what we really found was it helped them heal. It helped them better communicate with themselves, with their therapists, with each other. Creativity was really a conduit for them to be able to kind of talk about the things that had happened to them. Ultimately, I ran up against a lot of like red tape and bureaucracy, as you can imagine.
Sure.
There aren't the resources. You can only kind of travel so high in that career path. So the year I got married, we came back and I quit my job. So I'm sure my husband was like, great. But my first business was actually a wraparound counseling service for local youth, at-risk youth. Okay. Where I took that idea of like writing and art therapy into people's homes, and I circumvented using insurance companies so that it made it affordable for families. Okay. But it was just so powerful that I realized, you know what, I need to not only pursue my own personal dreams, make this kind of a bigger venture. Went back to school for multiple degrees, studied abroad underneath different authors and industry titans, and really got the qualifications that I needed to do the work that I wanted to do. Okay. And so that's kind of how I came into this. From there, I've owned independent publishing houses. I coordinate one of the largest writing conferences in the country. And now, I work full time in my own studio as a writer foremost, but as an editor and a book coach. And I love it. You know, my mission has always been to lift up underrepresented voices and to kind of
That's awesome.
help marginalized people find their voice through creativity and without inhibition, without judgment. And the product has been a lot of really beautiful books and projects and art, and it's great.
That's awesome. I mean, how cool is that? I mean, I can't even imagine being able to make a living doing everything that you're passionate about.
I think people lie to you. I think society lies to you because it's difficult. There's not really a lot of carved out space for creatives. So you really believe this narrative that there is no money in it. And I'm here to tell you that's not true. You know, like you can make a living. It is a hustle at first, obviously, but it is possible. A big part of my job is every year I take on 5 women creatives and I teach them how to do what I do and to make money, to make a full-time living out of their creativity.
You invented a word for that.
Yeah, they are authorpreneurs. Yeah,
which I think is very cool. That is very cool, and it's very descriptive. And I get it. It makes perfect sense. I mean, at this point in my life, if I could make a living as a writer, just doing books or doing anything around books, I would love that.
Yeah,
you know, because it's an amazing experience to take everything from here and combine it and put it here and have a finished product.
Correct.
Right. This is we're close to this, but I can't wait. Not because I want to get rich from it, but because I really put a lot into it. And honestly, if I could recoup expenses, I really don't care how many books we sell, but this process has changed my life.
Yeah.
It has made me into a better person. It has helped me to come to grips with, because I had the depressive disorders and all these things. Was diagnosed years ago. I've had all that. It really helped me to reconcile that and put that into the proper perspective, right? Because it forced me to tell myself the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we don't realize that art and creativity is just a form of introspection, and it just helps us become better people. And there's no reason that if that's who you are as a person, though, you know, there's a difference kind of between using art and being an artist. And I think people who identify as an artist or as a creative need to be doing that daily. And they also have something to offer other people.
Sure.
And that offering should be able to be monetized. That offering should be valued. And I think that a lot of times we tell artists and creatives that it's, you know, it's great that you can do that, but, you know, people don't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
And I really try hard to change that narrative, because I want people to see the value in participating in creativity. And so if an artist or a creative can give you that guidance, can offer you that mentorship that helps change you as a better person through their creative process and their art, that's absolutely valuable and should be monetized.
Yeah. And you are very expressive, right? From your tattoos and everything, and I get the impression from you, and obviously we haven't met in person before this, but I get the impression that you really don't spend a whole lot of time worrying about what people think.
I think we all worry about what other people think.
Plus, you walked into a coffee shop with a Starbucks cup.
I really
is cool.
No,
wait a minute. No,
it's
no,
not.
No, listen. That is. I think it's awesome. I'm messing with you a little bit, but that says, you know, little things like that tell us about people, right? When you walked in and I saw you carrying that cup, I thought, this is going to be fun.
I really didn't. I felt bad because I was like, I should patronize this place. I probably will before I leave. But I just really needed it on the long drive.
No, that's okay. I am messing with you, but and these people are wonderful. You'll love it here.
Yeah.
Actually, after being here and you have some coffee or something, you'll want to come here a lot because they're just wonderful people. So you've got this space now. What is your I guess favorite platform? I mean, are you a visual artist? Are you more comfortable with the written word, spoken word? Because you do a lot of speaking.
I am least comfortable with speaking.
Okay.
It's very difficult for me. I want to share with people and I love to connect with people, but I'm not the kind of person that's really good at like standing at a podium and doing public speaking. I love most doing workshops and teaching, but I make everybody kind of sit in a circle like Kumbaya style and get really close and intimate, because that's really how I function.
You have to make that connection.
Yes. But in terms of mediums, I really need to be able to balance both between writing and visual art. And I'm learning about myself over the years that every time I finish a book, it seems to need to like become something else. The last book we adapted into a spoken word play for the stage that premiered at the Carnegie.
Okay.
And that was a beautiful experience. And then this obviously has become the art installation. I just think that sometimes when I find myself finishing a book and the words are all on the page, that sometimes those words just want a second life or a different life. And I really think that it's important to be able to take our creativity and interpret it into all sorts of mixed media. I think a lot of people, I have a lot of conversations with people who say like, oh, I want to do that. I think about that. I just didn't know that you could do that.
Right.
And of course you can do that, you know? So, I really try. I think I just personally live in between written word and visual art as my mode of expression. But I, in terms of like personality, yes, I 100% identify as a writer first and foremost.
See, yeah, I'm kind of the opposite. I am very comfortable in front of people speaking, you know, because I've done that in my career for a long time.
Yeah.
So, and I do a lot of that with in business and with kids and everything like that. And I have no artistic ability whatsoever, right? I can't draw stick figures, and it's absolutely funny. But I'm becoming very comfortable with writing, more comfortable since I've been doing the blog and things like that. So, who is your favorite writer? Let me ask you this. We did a show yesterday with a good friend of mine, and we're both kind of jazz aficionados. And I asked him who was on his Mount Rushmore of jazz artists. Who's your Mount Rushmore of writers?
Well, contemporary writers right now, I mean, my favorite writer is Catherine Lacey. Okay. She's incredible. If you haven't read anything from her, please do. She's actually just releasing a book right now called The Biography of X. I'm sure it'll be amazing. I just pre-ordered, so I'm excited about that.
Okay.
Jessica Anthony is another wonderful contemporary writer that I really love. But in terms of kind of canonical writers, I'm a big Virginia Woolf fan. That's kind of my like beacon, my guiding light for everything.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm a real modernist in that way. I love early 20th century literature. I spent a lot of my time in my degree work in that phase of writing. So yeah, I think, and I also think though there's a lot of great genre bending surrealist artists right now coming from indie presses, and so that's something to watch out for too.
Cool, excellent.
And every book from $2 Radio, I just want to plug this publishing house for people. If you need an introduction to that sort of kind of like experimental work, go buy $2 Radio books.
Is that right?
Yeah, they're wonderful.
What is that? Where is that? Tell me about it. How
$2
do
Radio,
we find it?
$2 Radio, just Google it. They have that's the name of the press. They're an independent publishing press, and they have some bigger titles on their label that have been made into some films, but they also publish a lot of like smaller books too that you might not have heard of. One of my favorites by them is by a woman named Abby Andrews. It's called The Word for Woman is Wilderness. It's an incredible read. But yeah, they just, everything that they come out with, I love. So when people are always looking for new books, I always say like they have a huge catalog to pick from.
Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. That's a part of the business that I don't know anything about.
Sure.
You know, and that's a difficult part because the journey from thought to published book it's not an easy one to navigate. You know, so it's not just. And I learned this the hard way. You're sitting and say, you know what? I've had some great experiences. I've done some things, blah, blah, blah. I'd like to write a book.
Yes.
Right? There's a hell of a lot that goes into that.
Yes.
So what would you tell someone if somebody came to you, if I came to you and I said, listen, Amanda, I have this concept, this idea. I think it can be a book. Okay. So I'm going to engage with you. Talk us through that process. What does that look like?
Sure. I'll give you my entire process, but let me just preface this by saying that the publishing industry is notoriously difficult to break into because it's confusing. So I get it. And the crux of my business, the point of what I do is to demystify that process for people because I went through 2 degrees and understudies and worked in traditional publishing in literary magazines. And I still was like, how do I publish a book? You know, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So if you were to come to me and you had a book idea first, it would depend on whether the book's written or not. So I help people with content creation first, which means just kind of drafting your book, writing it, teaching you how to become a better writer, kind of massaging your craft to make that book the best that it can be. So we would go through that process. Once the draft's written, you go through professional editing. So you go through a content edit, or some people call it a developmental edit, meaning your book is scanned for to make sure all of that your content is delivered in a way that's readable, that's digestible, that's ordered in the proper way, that's just, as concise as it can possibly be. Then you go through copy editing, which fixes all of your grammar, punctuation, syntax errors, that sort of technical thing. And then it depends whether you're going to pursue traditional publishing, meaning you want to be published by a publishing house, or if you're going to pursue self-publishing. So if you're going to pursue self-publishing, we have a design studio. So your book gets laid out, interior design, professional interior design, book cover, make sure that it matches all of your brand assets for marketing. Then we do publishing coaching. We teach you about the different publishing platforms, what's best for you, which one you should use, how to use them, how to manage them on the back end. And then you can go through the marketing and PR process to kind of become a working artist. If you veer off that path earlier and you want to pursue traditional publishing, then we teach you that process. And that process really depends on whether you're a fiction writer or a nonfiction writer. So if you're a fiction writer, you're going to want to query literary agents and try to secure yourself an agent. So that's an entire other process in and of itself. If you're a nonfiction author and you still want to secure a literary agent, but it's just a different process. Instead of writing the book, you write a book proposal. And then there's a whole bunch of like option B, C, D, E there too. There are middle grade and independent presses that do accept unsolicited manuscripts, meaning you don't need an agent. So that's sometimes the best option for some people. There's nothing like lesser about that at all. It's just that some of these places are like niche presses that specialize in your genre, perhaps. So it's the best home for your book. So we explore all of that with people, make sure they're making the best decisions for themselves. So yeah, that's a whole lot of like trying to give you really quick technical, this is what the process looks like. Yeah. But it is complicated, it is involved, but I really try to break it down into manageable chunks and timelines for people so that you have enough time, you don't feel stressed, you don't feel overwhelmed. Okay.
Is there a specific genre or type of book that you prefer to work in or work with?
No, I do everything. We do a lot of fiction, nonfiction, memoirs. We do a lot of children's books, which is super fun. We have some staff illustrators, so I love that process. I don't know. I just come across so many beautiful stories all the time. And I just really feel grateful that people trust me to take these passion projects and turn them into like these physical products that they can love. So I don't have a preference. If I don't feel like the project is right for me, or if I feel like I don't have expertise in their genre or their topic, I turn them down because I want you to find the professional that makes the most sense for your project. Like I'm not the person to go to if you're writing like a housekeeping book or a cookbook or something like that. I mean, there are other people who are really good at that, and it's not me. But if you are trying to explore fiction writing or a personal memoir or something like that, like I'm your gal.
There you go. That's awesome. That is awesome. And there's so much. You're right. It's overwhelming, and I dove into it, and it's definitely overwhelming. So. So let's get a little bit. You've published books. Tell me a little bit about some of the books you've written. You said novella. You published at 12. You have several works, mostly fiction.
So I have one fiction book right now that's on query with agents, and then a book of poetry called Blue Rooms that was published in 2018, and then this book is poetry and prose, The Remembering Room, that we just published. It's not available to the public yet. You can actually only get a copy if you visit the exhibit, and then I'm trying to decide what will happen after the exhibit closes with the book. So,
and the exhibit's open until April 16th?
April 16th, yes. You can also get a copy. We're doing a workshop at the exhibit on April 2nd, so you can get a copy that way in a private tour of the exhibit with me. So,
excellent.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
But so 3 books like published, working, and then always a ton of projects on the back burner. Always. Yeah.
Well, I think you always have a lot of things when you're creative. You have a lot of things that are in flux that are just because then you go on to this and you put that down and go on to that. Yeah. So it's fascinating. It's an entirely different world than business, the way I know business. You go out, you network, you do these things, but the literary world and it's a different animal.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, it really is. And you can very easily make bad choices and go down a rabbit hole, right? If you don't, and I think that you can say that about a lot of businesses, but if you don't do your homework and do the research, you can really go down a path and get lost. It's very simple. You have to have a guide. Somebody's got to guide you.
You really need a guide. You really need somebody who understands what's best for your path. A lot of times what's really difficult in the industry is for fiction writers to build platform and to be able to kind of get their work out into the world, because that's really important step for people who want to ultimately get their books published. So meaning that you should always be submitting small pieces to be published in literary magazines and things like that. So, that resume for me looks a lot different. That's much bigger than how many books I've published. And that's how it should be, because when you're pitching to have a book published, they're going to want to know, well, where can I find your work? Where can I read excerpts? Where can I find your short stories, your poetry, whatever it is for you? And so that's a long, arduous path filled with lots of rejection. And my industry is filled with lots of rejection. And that's really that's where people really give up. And it's hard because I see so many very talented people get crushed under the weight of that sort of like rejection and judgment. But the truth is, the people who ultimately get published and who are successful in the literary world are people who just persevere. So I do a lot of work trying to kind of help people through that process and talk about that. So that's one end, and that's difficult, but it's also very rewarding. It's the only industry in which you kind of have to, it's writers are like introverts, right? So many of them are just like strange introverts that just want to write books and like get them out into the world. But to be a writer really requires you to be a lot more vocal, to be a lot more vulnerable.
Put yourself out there. Yeah.
To get a lot of rejection. So it's hard. This is this clash.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the self-publishing world, like, yes, you need a guide. You need somebody to help you put out work that is professional, that is cost effective, that supports whatever platform you're trying to build. A lot of times people who are self-publishing are trying to support like a business platform, you know? And so you have to make sure that all of those elements work together in such a way that you're building a machine that works.
Right.
And that really requires somebody who understands the business of publishing, as well as how to like properly write a piece of literature.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
a complex process.
It's a complex world. Yeah.
There's
But
no doubt.
but I hate talking about it that way because I don't ever want to discourage people from pursuing it, because it's also like a really magical place. So
Oh yeah. I mean, you can see it. I mean, you can just see it in your face what it all means to you when you're talking about it, right? And that's wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about you. You have a son.
I do.
He's what, about 2 now? Or?
No, he just turned 1 on Friday.
Well, just turned 1. Well, yeah, I guess, there is a time period before he actually is born. You'd think I'd know that. I have like 5 kids and 12 grandkids. So it's
wow.
Yeah. Well, 2 stepkids. And
that's cool though.
A whole mess of, it's awesome. It was, my dad used to say that if he knew how much fun grandkids were, he'd have had them first. Yeah. You know, so, and it's a very true statement.
Yeah.
You know, but, so how's that? How's that being a new mom and a new working mom and all those things?
It's wonderful. I didn't think I wanted kids. And now I just can't believe I almost didn't do that. You know, it's the best thing in the world. I feel like, you know how your friend, when you don't have kids and then you have friends that have kids and then all of a sudden they become annoying people and you stop hanging out with them. Like, I'm definitely that person now. And I get it. And like, I feel bad for judging those people all those years, but I get it 100%. And my whole world revolves around him and he's amazing. It's incredible to watch him grow. And it's made me grow from a creative perspective too, because just it gives you such a new lease on your perspective on life.
Yes, absolutely.
Especially in our situation. So yeah, it's wonderful and I love it. Being a working mother, it's hard. Of course it's hard. And everything, I'm a very like structured type A kind of person. And now that's kind of all out the window because he rules the roost. Yeah. So that's been a challenge for me, but it's really important to me to keep working, to keep creating, to keep doing what I do, because I want him to grow up seeing that.
Sure.
I want him to
I think that's so important.
I do too. And I want him to be a part of that. And I want him to know that he's so capable of all of these things, and to show him that like I need to keep persevering in what I'm doing. And so, I love that. And I love the relationship we're building through that.
That's amazing, because I don't think we put, our society as a whole puts enough emphasis on the value to a child of a professional mother. Yeah. You know, we always connect it to the father. You know, dad goes out, he works, he has a career and everything, and mom's the nurturer and all those things. But, you know, mom can be pretty badass too. And that I think that especially boys need that so that they be, you know, when they're little, because that helps them to become good men when they're adults.
I agree.
Right? And I think that's wonderful, because, you know, you look at Nick's mother's a dear friend of mine. We've worked together professionally for, almost 25 years. And she is at the very top of her profession. She's an engineer. You know, she has thrived in what is very much a man's world, right? And if you look at Nick and his 2 sisters, they're very strong-willed, independent people, because they had that strong-willed, that strong person that they saw her go out every day and really fight for them. Yes. You know what I mean? In a career. So I think that's important what you're doing and showing your son that.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And
awesome. It's fun. You know, for me, it's fun because I get to take him to the office. So,
you
know, it's a good time. He did a couple strokes of paint on the exhibit. So nice.
Nice. That is so cool.
Yeah.
I always took my kids to work. I was like, you know, and it always amazed me. And for the most part, I don't think I would go to like a borough council meeting, right? I used to take my kids to Baldwin Borough Council meeting.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And I would tell them as they got a little bit older, because they wanted to hang out. And I would say, listen, what I do is a little bit different, right? So there are going to be people there that are going to say bad things about your dad. You're going to be angry, right? Because, and there's going to be people who are going to be overly effusive with praise for me that I probably don't deserve either, and to get them to understand that. And I think in the long term, it really helped them as they got older to process things, to process, again, rejection and things like that, So it's funny in my world is you go into a room and that based on a decision you have to make, 50% of the room's going to hate you and the other 50% will love you, So, but that going in and you can deal with it and you can process it, and there's some creativity. I always thought that engineers were analytical and architects were creative. Okay, until I got into the engineering work. So I'm not an engineer by education, more by vocation, but engineers have to have now, especially in today's marketplace, have to have that creative piece. You got to be able to think outside the box. It's about more than numbers now. So I think that's amazing. And do you have any thoughts on, one place where engineering curriculums at the university setting is really lagging is in that artistic piece. They emphasize the math, and you really have to have the math and all of that. But I think that there is a space, a niche for an artistic piece of that overall engineering education.
Sure.
I think it would be important.
Sure. I think creativity is trusting intuition. It's about letting that inside guide in yourself make decisions for you and trusting those decisions and then just seeing what happens. Right. And so I think in any career field, but I can understand why in engineering, that's kind of an important trait to have, because if you can couple that with the critical thinking that's required in an engineering field, then you can make innovative things, right? That's kind of the equation for innovation, is that you have the skill set, the critical analysis to be able to solve a problem, but you need something new, like something that you don't necessarily know what it is yet. And that's creativity. Sure. That's trusting that little voice inside. And when you compare those things, then you come up with new solutions for stuff. So I think there's always space for creativity in those sorts of fields, in every field. I mean, absolutely. That's the same process by which creativity helps you heal like personal wounds and grow as a person, right? Sure. And so when we start thinking about it that way and transmuting that kind of idea into math and science fields, we allow people the permission to try new things. Absolutely. Absolutely. I was a project manager for the first part of my career, and I would still be doing that, which is not a bad thing. Listen, it's a great way to make a living. But when I discovered that I had the ability to write and speak is when my career really took off and went to a level that otherwise it wouldn't have. Sure. So and I think no matter how intelligent you are, how much you get the math and the science, if you can't write or speak, okay, you're only going to go so far in just about any career. Sure. And the more ways you know how to communicate, the more pathways you're constantly building. And I think everybody needs to be doing that, because if everybody's doing that, then we're all simultaneously learning to think in different ways that are only pushing us forward. People become stagnant because it's like, this is what I do and this is how I do it. Sure. Yeah. But once we allow for creativity in the ways that people do things, I mean, this is why like Google's so successful, right? Everybody talks about like when you work on a Google campus, that there are all of these strange ways that they do things, and there's like slides and themed rooms, and you can kind of come and go as you please. But that allows space for people's natural creativity to invade the kind of mathematical and analytical processes that they do in their job. And so that creates a lot of innovation in a company like that. So I just think that should be such a model for how we approach everything that we do. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And, and I think a lot of people don't embrace their creative space, their creative side, because they're afraid to. They're afraid of the rejection. Humans don't like to be rejected for anything. We don't like to expose ourselves, but unless you're willing to take a little risk and be embarrassed maybe once in a while, or maybe even hurt a little bit, you're never really going to know what you're capable of. Creativity is vulnerability. And I think people are more afraid about what they'll discover about themselves, or like facing difficult things. I mean, this is why the trope exists that the best art comes from pain, you know, that like depressed people write the best things. But the truth is really, it's just because when people are tackling really difficult issues head on without fear, they are coming up with things, creative ideas about those things that are new and inspiring. And I can understand the fear in that, but I can say after working with thousands of people, I've never seen a creative be embarrassed. They think they're going to be embarrassed by their work.
But
they're
afraid
actually
to do,
not. But I've never seen somebody embrace the process and come out and be like, wow, that was really embarrassing.
It's that fear of it.
It's never happened.
Right.
Because when you discover something through your own creativity, it doesn't matter what other people think about it. The feeling that it gives you, the growth that it gives you, the new lease and perspective that it gives you can never be embarrassing. That's the beautiful thing about growth and change through creativity. You have to, the difficult part is trusting that that's how it'll happen.
We have grandkids. They're 15, they're twins, boy and a girl, and they're yin and yang. Okay. Caleb is very analytical. He's a 4.0 plus student. He gets it. He doesn't even have to study to get an A in any subject. And then there's Chloe, who's my little hippie. You know, she's very artistic. She loves to write things. She loves to paint, and she's very raw. She's never had been taught or anything, but she's got that real creative soul, right? And it's just very funny the way that they interact with each other, because it's like, Caleb would be, you got to study, you got to do this, you got to do that, and she's painting this, and she's flitting around over here, and I remember asking her once, do you think maybe you ought to like study for this class? And she said, that's why I got him. It's like, I don't think that's a thing. But it's just really interesting to watch their interactions from the time they were infants. They actually had this communication thing going on before they could even say words. They communicated with each other. So, and that's a very cool thing. But it's just fascinating how our minds work and how we interact with each other, and how it all just meshes if you just have the patience and are willing to put yourself out there. And again, embrace vulnerability. Vulnerability is a scary word.
Absolutely.
It's a very scary word.
Absolutely.
I
mean, I think you hear this from a lot of people, but everything, just to be like completely transparent, like everything that I do it through fighting a whole lot of anxiety and fear. And I tell people that all the time. Every time I do speak, I say like, wow, I'm really nervous right now. Let's just let that out in the room. But I just do it anyway. Like, yes, I'm sweating. Yes, inside I feel sick. Like, yes, I'm nervous. Like, I'm nervous right now. I always
show up and do it.
But you show up and do it, because every time you show up and do it, you teach your brain that you can do it, and you grow a little bit, and it helps a little bit. And it might not ever feel as good for me as it does for like a professional speaker who has no nerves about it. But it's important that I'm constantly challenging myself in that way. And it improves my creativity, and it improves my ability to be a professional. I just think it's important that we're always pushing ourselves. Like, if you consistently stay in a safe place where you don't have to worry about being embarrassed or judged or feeling those kinds of feelings, like, what's the point?
Right. You're exactly right. There's a huge difference between being alive and living.
Yes.
And I talk about that a lot, because, you wake up in the morning, you're blessed, you're alive. You open your eyes, you take a breath, you're alive. Right. So what are you gonna do from there? Somebody told me once that, if your life is a pond, right? So you're alive. There's a beautiful pond. It's pristine. It's serene. And then you drop a pebble in it, and the ripples take off. That's living, right? That's living your life. And that's a very great analogy, because it's you have to move. Living is putting your life into motion. And again, like you said, being vulnerable and going out and taking those risks and putting yourself out there. It's not easy.
No. And it helps you see the value in what you offer. It helps you see the value in your own story. I mean, I have this same conversation like several times a day with somebody saying like, oh, I want to write this book. But like, why does it matter? Like nothing big has ever happened to me, And am constantly trying to remind people that it's not the big things that happen to you. It's the small things that you're thinking. It's everything that you go through. It's your experience as a human.
You know, it's not the splash.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just the human condition that every time we share it, somebody else feels seen. And that's important. Like, that's what makes your story important. And so it's, for me, it's just constant validation of, if I can share these things with other people and they resonate with it and they can walk away feeling a little bit healed, a little bit seen, or inspired to go do these things too.
Perfect. That's beautiful.
Then that makes it worth it. That makes it worth the fear.
That's beautiful. And I think great writers write to one person.
Yeah, themselves.
You know, exactly. And you know, when I speak, you know, a few weeks ago, I talked to probably about 150 real estate agents, right? A good friend of mine has a real estate, she's a broker. So she asked me to speak to them, and I said, what do you want me to say? She said, just motivate them. You know, so I'm not a motivational speaker, right? Because I would say, if you had to label what I do, my message when I talk is it's inspirational. Okay, I can inspire you to want to do something, but you have to motivate yourself to do it.
Yeah,
I can't motivate you.
Sure.
Right. So that's kind of like what I do. But I do that even when, you know, when I'm speaking, I talk to 150 people just like I'm talking to you right now. I don't change anything. I'm not a podium guy. You know, I walk around, but I'm very conversational, not presentational, right? Sure. I don't present, and I think that comes off really well. So when you're talking to people, you make them feel comfortable. You get comfortable, okay? And so that's what I do. I'll pick a person out in a room and talk to them. Yeah, you know, and it's just it's easy. Yeah. You know, it's just like sitting here having a coffee and talking. You know,
that's your gift.
Yeah. Well, and I'm blessed for that, because I told somebody the other day, I had a science teacher. Well, it was our football coach in high school, and he taught biology, and I bet he told me at least 250 times, I talk too much. Protin, you talk too much. You talk too much. So I ran into him years later. I was in my 50s, and I saw him. We stayed in touch. He's a wonderful guy, and I said, you know, Coach, thank God. I thank God every day that I didn't listen to you. And he said, why? I said, because I'd be unemployed. I talk for a living. That's what I do. I get paid to talk now, you know, and he laughed. He thought that was funny. He said, well, I wasn't paying you. You were a pain in the ass. So, but you know, everybody has a gift, you know, and what we're talking about here, the creative process, is I think how we bring that gift out and share it with the world.
Yes.
Because you have to share it, right? Yes. You can't be selfish with it.
No. And it's how you refine your gift too. Sharing it is how you refine it. Because you realize once you share it how important it is to make it the best it can be. Yeah. And so then you start to refine it, and then you realize, oh wait, I can do even more with this. Or then the ideas compound on themselves. And then you start to realize, wait, I can create something bigger out of this for myself. Like, that's how it all starts. And that all starts with just like leaping over that fear and making one thing.
Yeah. That is so cool. Yeah. That is awesome. Where are we at, Nick?
Right at 50.
Okay. So we'll start to close out here. So what's your message? What would you like the takeaway from the 4 people that are watching this? What would you like their takeaway to be?
I would like their takeaway to be simply what we've been saying, to just take that leap into creativity. If you feel compelled to make something, and it doesn't matter what it is, it's a book, a podcast, a blog, a painting. It doesn't matter what it is, but to embrace it.
And it doesn't have to be perfect in the beginning.
It never has to be perfect.
Right?
Well, and I think that taking that leap is about the process, not the product.
Yes.
We get really caught up in what's the product going to look like, and we don't focus on, enjoy, or be mindful of what we're learning in the process. And that's the important part of creativity. And so I hope people kind of embrace whatever it is that they're looking to do, and then be really present in the process of it, so that it helps them grow as a person and creates new opportunities in their lives, whether it be physical opportunities or just like emotional, spiritual, psychological opportunities, whatever it is, just so that you can lead a more vibrant life.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And it's, listen, I'm 63 years old, and I learn something new every single day. I learned something here today from you, and I'm very happy that we've connected, because I think that we're going to be able to collaborate on things moving forward, because there's a lot of synergy. And, you know, just if you go back and look at our first couple podcasts and this one and the ones we're doing now, we weren't really good at it when we started. You know, we were just making it up as we go. I mean, even, you know, the production quality from Nick's side of things and my interaction, believe it or not, I talked more then than I did now. So, you know, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. People aren't tuning into this to listen to me. They want to talk. They want to hear the guests. So because I'm not a professional interview. I don't do this. I mean, you know, I'm just having a conversation. And so being a talker, having to become a listener. Yeah. You know, and I've gotten better at it. But that growth process is, it's actually cool to see.
Yeah, of course. Really is, yeah. You know? Yeah. It's affirming. It feels good. And you create a great podcast now, and then you can share it with more people the better you become at it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So Tithy Studios through April 16th.
Yes.
Check it out. Get up and see Amanda's exhibit. When we'll give you let us know when this is out, when people can get it, and we'll put that out there on our social and everything like that. And please start, you know, you have anything going on, share it on our social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, the whole 9 yards, and we're happy to help you put that stuff out there. And I'm real happy you came and we had the time to sit down with us. This was awesome.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Yes. Appreciate it.
This was great.